In this video, you're going to be learning about comparing decimals to the thousands place. All right, let's start out with the vocabulary. The three terms that we're going to be using very heavily today are greater than, less than, and equal to. And then we're also going to be using least to greatest and greatest to least. I want you to make sure that you have this place value chart written down somewhere in your math notebook. It's going to be really important that you know these place values, that you know behind the decimal place we have tenths, then hundredths, then thousandths. All right, so first of all, let's start out by unlocking this problem. The problem reads, the table lists some of the mountains in the United States that are over 2 miles high. How does the height of Cloud Mountain in New York compare to the height of Boundary Mountain in Nevada? So let's look at our table here and see if we can figure out what those two different heights are. So the first one says the height of Cloud Mountain. So Cloud, New York right here. Follow the table over and I can read that the height of Cloud Mountain is 2 495 thousandths of a mile. Our second one is Boundary Mountain in Boundary, Nevada. I can see that the mountain's height is 2 488 thousandths of a mile. Okay, so now that I have my two lengths here, I'm going to have to try to figure out which one is greater, which one is less than, and then I will use my either greater than, less than, or equal to symbols. All right, so the easiest way to compare is by starting in the highest place value. So we always try to compare to the highest place value, and like we said in the last video, the further left you go, the greater the place value, the further right you go, the lesser the place value. So we're going to start out by going to the highest place value and comparing those two numbers. When I am starting out doing this, I always like to write them like this, up and down, so I can really see. So there's Cloud Mountain, and here is Boundary Mountain. Okay, so I'm going to start with the highest place value, which is the the ones place. In the ones place here, I see that they both have 2's. So far they're both equal in the ones place. Then I move over to the tenths place. I see that I have 2 4's here, a 4 and a 4, which means they're equal in the tenths place. Then I move over to the hundredths place. Well, I see here that in the Cloud Mountain one, I have a 9. And in the Boundary Mountain one, I have an 8. Because the Boundary Mountain has a smaller number in the tenths place, that means this one is the lesser decimal. That means that Cloud Mountain is going to be bigger. So the one that has a greater number in that place value is the bigger one. So that means that Cloud Mountain is greater than Boundary Mountain. Now, I don't necessarily need to go over to the hundredths place because I already know that, in the thousandths place, because I already know that in the hundredths place, that comes before thousandths. So whatever is in that hundredths place is where I need to look first. Okay, so I compared those two. Cloud Mountain was greater than. All right, let's do some practice now. So here, let's start out with this first one. I have 4 563 thousandths versus 4 536 thousandths. Now, it's really important that you are close and careful reading when you're doing these. Let me just zoom in a little bit more so we can see this. It's very important that you're close and careful reading these two because they may look exactly the same, and actually they have the same digits, but they're in different orders. Okay, so like I said, what I like to do when I'm first starting out, and what I think would be a good idea for you, would be to line them up. So 4 536 and 4 563. And I'll go place value by place value to see where I can see the difference. So the 4s are both the same, so that means the ones place are equal. The 5s are both the same, which means that the tens place is equal. Now I come to the hundreds place and I see that one has a 6 and one has a 3. I know that 6 is greater than 3, so that means that this number right here, 4.563 or 4 and 563 thousandths, is going to be greater than 4 and 536 thousandths. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Why don't you pause the video and see if you can figure this one out on your own, and then replay the video when you're ready to move on. Okay, hopefully you've solved this one on your own. Let's line them up. 5 and 640 thousandths versus 5 and 664 hundredths. So let's look at these two numbers here. First of all, in the ones place, we have the same number, so they're equal there. In the tenths place, we have the same number, so they're equal there. And in the hundredths place, they have the same number, so they're equal there. So that leads us to the thousandths place. Now, in one number, I have a 0, and the other number, I have nothing. Well, if you were using your problem-solving skills, you would have noticed that after the decimal point, even if there are no more numbers here, zeros go on infinitely forever and ever and ever. Just like there's an infinite number of zeros this way before the 5. Now, we don't necessarily need to write these zeros out, but in this purpose, we know that in the thousandths place, in the first number, there is a 0. So to have something to compare it to, I'm going to put a 0 here. And we can tell that these two zeros mean that these two numbers are exactly the same. So that means in this problem, we would write an equal sign. And finally, we have our last problem here. 8 and 673 thousandths compared to 8 and 637 thousandths. So pause the video very quickly, solve this problem, and then replay when you're ready to move on. Okay, so let's compare. The 8s are both the same in the ones place. The 6s are both the same in the tenths place. In the hundreds place here, I have a 7 in one place and a 3 in the other. The 7 is greater than the 3, so that means 8 and 673 thousandths is greater than 8 and 637 thousandths. All right, so another really important skill to be able to do is to order the numbers. So basically, you're comparing the numbers, but then we are going to take it a step further by ordering it either from least to greatest or greatest to least. So let's start with this first one here. We have 4 and 8 hundredths, 4 and 3 tenths, 4 and 803 thousandths, and then 4 and 38 thousandths. So the first one, let's do together. What I like to do is I like to kind of line them up on the side first so I can figure out which one goes first, second, third, and fourth, and then I will order them over on the side. So let's line them all up. 4 and 8 hundredths, 4, 3 tenths, 4, 803 thousandths. All right, this one up here, 4 and 38 thousandths. So obviously in all these numbers, there is a 4 in the ones place, which means that they are all equal in that place value. So if I move over to the tens place, I can see that these two numbers right here, both have a 0 in the tens place. Now, because the question has asked me to order from least to greatest, I'm going to be looking for the smallest one first. So these two numbers have zeros in the tens place, which means that either one of these two are going to be the smaller numbers. So let's move over to the hundreds place to see if I can figure out which one is the smallest. Now that I move in the hundreds place, and remember I'm just looking at these two numbers because one of these two is going to be the smallest. I can see that this first one here has a 3 in the thousandths place versus this one that has an 8. So this one is going to be first. So 4 and 38 thousandths goes first in our list. Okay, so that means that the next one has to be 4 and 8 hundredths, because this one, if we're looking back here in the tens place, has a 0 in the tens place, which means it is smaller than the 3 and the 8. So then now I'm just looking at my tens place again. I can see that I have a 3 and an 8, so 4 and 3/10 will go next. And then 4 and 803 thousandths would go last because it is the greatest. All right, go ahead and pause the video. I want you to solve the next one on your own, and keep in mind it says to order from greatest to least. Okay, so let's order these numbers. You might have noticed that in the ones place, all the numbers are the same. They all have a 1. So that means they are all equal in the ones place. If I look now to the tenths place, I can see that I have a 7, a 3, a 0, and a 0. Now keep in mind I'm ordering from greatest to least, which means that I need to find the greatest one first. Well, out of the 7, 0, 3, and a 0, the 7 is the greatest, so that means 1 and 703 thousandths is first. Then the next one would have to be 1 and 37 hundredths, because the 3 is greater than both the zeros. And then next I look at these two, 1 and 37 thousandths and then 1 and 73 thousandths. And they both have zeros in the tenths place. Well, now I have to move over to the hundredths place so I can see which one is greater than the other. So if I look over in the tenths or the hundredths place, I can see one has a 3 and one has a 7. So obviously the one with the 7 is going to be greater. So then 1 and 73 thousandths is the next choice. And then finally, I ran out of room over here, I have 1 and 37 thousandths would be last because it is the least. Okay, so let's do some problem solving here. I have a table that tells me mountains over 3 miles high. It gives me some mountains and locations here, and it also tells me the heights in miles of those mountains. Our first question is asking us, in comparing the heights of the mountains, which is the greatest place value where the digits differ? Essentially, this question is asking us to compare those 3 mountain heights and figure out which is the place value in which they all start to have a different value. So let's compare these 3 mountain heights. So first of all, in the ones place here, we can tell that all of them have the same height. They are all 3 miles high. Let's move over to the tenths place. I can see in the tenths place that they all have the same number still. And then in the hundredths place, this is where things start to get different. So we can see that this one has a 0, this one has a 3, and this one has a 5. Therefore, the hundredths place is the place value in which the numbers are different. I know that it's not the thousandths place because it asks me for the greatest place value. And hundredths are greater than thousandths. The second question asks us, how does the height of Steel Mountain compare to the height of Blackburn Mountain? Compare the heights using words. What I would like you to do is to pause the video, compare those 2 mountains using the greater than, less than, or equal to symbol, and then replay the video when you are finished. I have the 2 values here written out, 3 and 152 thousandths of a mile for Steel Mountain, and then 3 and 104 thousandths of a mile for Blackburn Mountain. To compare these, first I'm going to look in the ones place. In the ones place, both the numbers are the same. In the tenths place, both the numbers are the same. In the hundredths place, I can see that they are different. Now I am looking here at the hundredths place. I can see this one is a 5 and this one is a 0. So that means that the Steel Mountain is greater than the Blackburn Mountain. To write this in words, I could just say Steel Mountain is greater than Blackburn Mountain. All right, friends, it is now time for the quiz. Go to Canvas and show what you have learned. Good luck.